Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks. I'm Zakka. Jacob. It's going to be a week in a couple of days since the release of the preliminary report on the crash of Air India Flight 171 from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. Today, a Wall Street Journal report seemed to suggest that it was pilot error, and it was deliberate pilot error on the part of the pilot in charge, Captain Sumit Sabharwal, which led to the cutoff of the two fuel switches. Now, there is nothing to substantiate this in the preliminary report of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board, but the journal reports claims that they spoke to somebody who has heard the entire cockpit voice recorder conversation, but they've not revealed further details of that conversation other than the line that was already shared in the AAIB report. Now, many airline experts are calling this a hit job, or at the very least, a very, very premature conclusion at this stage. Now, to counter that, there are also domestic media reports which have come out today again, which suggest that it's not human error or pilot error, leave alone a deliberate one. It could have been an electronic fault with a transducer that led to the crash. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the Accident Board, both have come out and appealed not to speculate on the cause of the crash and, at the very least, respect the dead, respect the pilots, because they can't come out and defend themselves. There seems to be a bit of a pattern going on here. The AAIB report certainly did not say that the pilots were responsible, but Western media reports seem to be alluding in that direction. So are the pilots being unfairly and quickly being blamed, and Boeing, the company, on the other hand, being given a free pass? So one of the domestic reports, this was by the Indian Express this morning, which was put out in a way countering what the WSJ's report was. It points the finger at something called the stabilizer position transducer. Now, what is this STB? It is a sensor which controls the movement, the ups and downs of the nose of the plane. If you look at the final few seconds before the plane crashes, the nose is being, lifted up, and the plane sort of wallows and then crashes in. Now, what this transducer does, it basically transmits the data in the form of electrical signals to the flight control system, or the FADEC, which then ensures that there are appropriate responses to pilot input. There are accurate responses to pilot input. What the stabilizer position transducer, the SPT, and a defect in that transducer, it may not have directly led to the fuel cutoff switches being turned from run to cutoff, but what it could have led to is a multiple sensory failure. Now, if there's a multiple sensor failure, any malfunction could become a critical issue that can trigger an incorrect response to the FADEC, which is the sort of supercomputer that controls the flight control, including there could be unintended fuel cutoff signal. So if this transducer defect, and by the way, what is interesting is, so this was a double leg flight. The first leg of this flight was from Delhi to Ahmedabad, and then from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. In the first leg of this flight, which was Delhi to Ahmedabad, the pilot who flew that leg notes this problem. He logs it in the technical log for that flight. An engineer is alerted of Air India. He comes on board, he gets into the cockpit, he fixes this problem, and then clears the flight as worthy to be flown again. Now, this contests the theory that's been put out by foreign media outlets like the Wall Street Journal, which are squarely trying to put the blame on the pilots, particularly the captain of the flight, which was Sumit Sabharwal, saying that he was the one who deliberately pulled the fuel cutoff switch, in fact, moved the fuel cutoff switch from the run position to the cutoff position. Now, here's the thing. The fuel cutoff switch cannot move without human intervention. That is what we were told up until now. But now it's being probed if the fuel valve, because the switch then sends a signal to the valve is what controls the movement of the fuel from the fuel tank to the carburetor, and from the carburetor eventually to the engine, where it's burnt, and then it gives power to the engine to propel itself. Now, what is being probed was there some kind of software malfunction, some technical glitch, which could have led the fuel control valve to malfunction. So even if the switch was in the run position, the valve was cutting off the flow of fuel because of a technical or software glitch. Now, sources within the aviation ministry say that a stab POS XDCR, this was an error that was noted by the pilots immediately, in fact, in the first leg of the flight, which was the Delhi-Ahmedabad leg of the flight. It's called the stab POS XDCR error. This was logged in the technical log after the first leg of that flight. That points to a stabilizer position transducer defect or a problem with the positioning of the nose of the aircraft, which could have resulted in a faulty electrical signal being sent to the FADEC. The FADEC is the supercomputer that controls the control systems of the aircraft, and that could have sent a faulty signal to the valves, telling the valves to shut off fuel supply to both the engines.
More than a month after the Ahmedabad crash, the debate about what led to it continues. The latest seems to be focused on possible software, mechanical or electrical failures that could have triggered a transition of the fuel valve. What is this new theory? So far, if you remember, the AAIB report had said that the engine lost power because fuel supply stopped, and there was intense debate as to how the fuel cutoff switch, which can only be moved manually and only through human intervention, that switch moved from run to cutoff mode and then back to the run position. Now, civil aviation experts are pointing out, these are experts both in the United States of America as well as chiefs of pilot association here in India, who are pointing out that there was a similar incident that was reported for Japan, where an airline, again Boeing 787 flight was seen to have maneuvered automatically into the fuel valve off mode without any intervention from the pilot. How did this really happen? This happened because these Boeing aircrafts are highly automated, and they are built in a way that without the pilot's intervention, without human intervention too, automatically there are some parameters on the ground. If there's some reading that the aircraft's automated unit captures, based on that they could formulate a response, and that response may not be in the control of the pilots who are flying. So because such an incident was reported in Japan, the ANA saw such an incident. Therefore, it is being speculated now if a similar valve malfunction led to fuel being cut off for the Air India aircraft which crashed in Ahmedabad.
Now, as these theories are being speculated upon, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has come out with an appeal against risking the integrity of the ongoing investigation. The statement was put out a couple of hours ago. The body that's investigating the AI-171 crash has flagged that some international media outlets, in this case the WSJ, are drawing premature conclusions through selective and unverified reporting. They reiterated that the preliminary report only explains what happened inside the cockpit and not why it happened, and it should not be seen as a final conclusion on what exactly went wrong and led to the crash of AI-171. So the Wall Street Journal this morning reporting, seeming to suggest that the cutoff, the fuel control switch is being moved from run to cutoff, was done by Captain Sabarwal, who was the pilot in command and the pilot monitoring of the fateful AI-171, which crashed just seconds after takeoff from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick. But is there some kind of a flaw or an error in that reporting? Because is it possible that this movement of the switch from run to cutoff can also happen overriding the electronic systems in the aircraft because of a faulty transducer, as has been suggested by other reporting, which has been attributed to some local media reports here in India? I want to try and go across to Miss Mary Schiavo. She'll be joining us. She's the former IG of the US Department of Transportation, author of the book Flying Blind, Flying Safe. And she seems to suggest that there have been instances with the Boeing fleet and even with the 787 itself, where in the past there have been instances because of software malfunctions or electric or electronic malfunctions, the FADEC has been overridden, and as a result of which, even if the fuel cutoff switch was in the run position, it would override that and show it to be in the cutoff position. I want to go across to Mary Schiavo. She's the former IG of the US Department of Transportation, author of Flying Blind, Flying Safe. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you've seen the Wall Street Journal story, which seemed to indicate that it was the captain who deliberately moved the fuel control switches to the cutoff position. I'm just wondering what you make of that story, and why would anyone, least of all a captain who's got more than 10,000 hours of flying experience on the 787, do something so deliberately? I mean, how do you see that story to start with?
Well, you cannot say that. So I read, obviously, the preliminary report very carefully, and the preliminary report from the AAIB does not say that. It says that the fuel control, it doesn't say the pilots did it. It says the fuel control was moved to the cutoff position, but it does not say the pilots did it.
No,
And
I'm talking about the Wall
both-
Street Journal story that came out this morning,
Right.
which suggests that it was the captain who did it.
Right, but I'm saying it's way too early to say that because the investigation has barely started. There have been many instances in the past where obviously Boeing, highly fly-by-wire fleets, and especially the 787, have had these kinds of problems without pilot input. And I think that's a tremendous leap by the Wall Street Journal or anyone who can leap and say the pilots did it and it was pilot suicide. But with this many people, obviously pilot murder, way too early. I've seen this before in investigations where they jump to the pilots immediately, and often it's proven wrong.
Why would they do that? Why would they jump to blame the pilots?
Well, because it's not unusual. In about 75 to 80% of the cases that happens, the pilots are blamed. I've personally worked on many investigations and many cases of subsequent litigations where the pilots were blamed, and we've been able to prove that's not the case at all. And, for example, pilots were blamed. I had a case I worked where we had dual engine flame out at over 40,000 feet, and it was core lock. The engines actually froze up. I had another case I worked where they blamed the pilots, and it turned out the maintenance manual was literally backwards for the manufacturer. If the pilot pulled nose up, the nose went down. So there have been many cases where pilots are blamed, and I think they do that to find an answer quickly. I mean, it's a bias in the investigation. It shouldn't happen. It's a known investigator bias where you latch on to initial theory, and that initial theory is proven to be wrong. It does hurt the investigation if the investigators buy into this early conclusion, but they won't. Seasoned, skilled, experienced investigators will hold out all options until a thorough investigation is completed. That's how it works.
So, in your experience, can you share with us an instance or two where you believe it was actually electronic failure or software malfunction or whatever other mechanical issues that led to air crashes or led to near air crash situations, which was then blamed on pilot error initially?
Right. Well, obviously, worldwide, most famous are the 737 MAX 8 cases where the aircraft itself was put into a dive. When the first crash happened in Indonesia, the world, everyone around, everybody blamed the pilots, said that the pilots should have been able to troubleshoot that malfunction, pull the breakers, stop the aircraft from going into an uncommanded dive. And there simply wasn't enough time. This happened on takeoff. And the second 737 MAX 8 crash then happened, and they started looking beyond the pilot. The second one never had to happen because had they done the investigation up front and not immediately blamed the pilots, they would have found the software malfunction months before the second one happened. Looking to the 787, the Boeing Dreamliner, the same kind of plane as this one is, in 2018, All Nippon Airways had a situation where it was coming into land. Crucial difference from taking off. It was coming into land. Same thing happened as happened here. Fuel control, the thrust control function was stopped. The fuel flow to the engines were stopped as it was coming into land. And the investigation showed that the aircraft did that all by itself because the aircraft and the aircraft software mistakenly thought the plane was already on the ground and cut the fuel. And this system is supposed to help when on the ground, so you don't have a runaway aircraft, you don't have an accident at the airport. And just this year, on a flight, a United Airlines flight from Washington, D.C. to Nairobi, the plane did some uncommanded maneuvers, and this was a 787. So there have been many instances of Boeing aircraft, particularly Boeing and subcontractor software, where the aircraft has taken uncommanded measures and done uncommanded things, including with fuel control on a 787.
So what was told to us in the aftermath of the preliminary report coming out last Saturday was that there's no way that the fuel cutoff switches could have been electronically or remotely moved from cutoff from run to cutoff. It was impossible to do so. It had to be done manually. You were saying that there have been instances in the past where that has happened because of uncommanded sort of instructions to the FADEC, right? Is that what you're saying, ma'am?
On an all-Nippon Airways flight in 2019. And there was a service bulletin that was put out specifically saying that that system should be checked, including the fuel control, the thrust control commands, and that should be checked. Now, that warning came out from the United States Federal Aviation Administration, and they have no ability to command airlines in the rest of the world. So whether the rest of the world check that system or not will be part of the investigation. Skilled investigators will look at that.
No, so I want to come back. So again, there is some local reporting today here in the press in India, which seems to suggest what you said. It was a transducer defect, which could have resulted in uncommanded instructions going to the software, which then overrides the fuel switches from run to cutoff.
Right. Well, again, that's, we're all basing our thoughts on prior accidents. What has happened before? In this case, what has to happen is that flight data recorder, it's the most advanced data recorder on aircraft in the world. It has it'll have millions of lines of information and clues. It has been captured over several days on that aircraft. That will have the answer. This will not be a mystery for long, because that will show exactly what occurred. And then they also do have to inspect the various lines of code on the key systems for these computers, because we know there have been mistakes in the past on Boeing fly-by-wire and other aircraft. But in this case, we're talking about Boeing. So that's
you've gone through the preliminary report that was released last week. What in your view sort of stands out as the blanks that have to be filled up, or the blanks that the report did not sort of go enough lengths to try and address?
Well, the preliminary report, and I do give credit to the AAIB, because in many horrific crashes of this magnitude, they don't get the preliminary report out in 30 days. Yeah. And I think people are misunderstanding the point of the 30-day report. The preliminary report only shows what they know to that point. This kind of an investigation, this is huge. This is a really big and important investigation. This will take years. And I can tell you, just doing the examination of the flight data recorder, that will take many, many months. They will have different teams addressing different issues. One team alone will be looking at the computerization of this aircraft and the computer code. So the preliminary report doesn't have holes in it. The preliminary report is in no way attempting to be an investigation report. In fact, it's supposed to help the families. The purpose of the preliminary report is to tell the families everything they know so far, to give information as much as possible to families and people who are suffering terribly from this crash. So the preliminary report contains absolutely no conclusions, and that is what it's supposed to do. It's not supposed to change conclusions or present conclusions, because they don't have any yet. They haven't done the investigation yet. And I give credit to the AAIB for not jumping to conclusions. They're not supposed to.
So just going back to where I started, so if it's the Wall Street Journal or anyone who's reporting at this stage that it was pilot error and deliberate pilot error that moved the fuel switches, you would say that that is too premature at this stage?
That is, first of all, that's absolute rubbish, because that is not contained in the preliminary report and should not be in the preliminary report. Second, there's not a shred of evidence of that, other than they said two lines. Why did you cut the fuel? And that's a paraphrasing. Usually release the whole transcript. And then the second pilot said, I did not. That's pretty good evidence so far that they did not. And then they have no indication. They can't say that who, if anyone, did that, but the flight data recorder will have that information. So at this point, for anyone to say that's the cause, it is rank speculation. It could actually harm the investigation, because we want this investigation to leave no stone unturned so another one does not happen.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us, Mary Schiavo, former IG of the U.S. Department of Transportation, joining us and explaining that it's too premature, too early to come to any kind of conclusion that it was pilot error, leave alone deliberate pilot error, that led to the crash of Air India 171. So I guess that in a way responds to the Wall Street Journal story. Let's shift focus now on brass tacks. It was meant to be a celebration of the 18-year wait, an end to the 18-year wait for the IPL trophy for RCB and their victory parade. But unfortunately, it turned out extremely tragic on the 4th of June. A stampede outside the Chinnaswamy Stadium claimed 11 lives. Now, a Karnataka government report has laid the blame entirely on Royal Challengers Bangalore, the management of the team, and the KSCA for this tragedy. The report says that the newly crowned IPL champions failed to consult the police before unilaterally inviting lakhs to a celebration at the stadium. Now, here's what the report says. Here's what the Karnataka High Court, after its hearing yesterday, had ordered the state government, saying release the stampede report and act accordingly. Now, according to this report, the RCB management contacted the police on the 3rd of June, the same day that RCB won the IPL. The report said that this was an intimation, not a requisition for permission as required by law. It also alleged that no applications in the prescribed formats were submitted to the licensing authorities. The report also said that RCB, without consulting the police, had posted on its official social media handles informing the general public that there is free entry for people, free entry for fans. They invited the fans to participate in the victory parade. Virat Kohli's video from the 4th of June is also mentioned in this report. This one-man panel that investigated this tragedy has concluded that the Indian cricketers' post, as well as other RCB posts on their social media handles, are inviting people for this free celebration, this free walk-in into the Chinnaswamy Stadium for the celebration. That led to the massive turnout, and that was one of the reasons why the police and the authorities were not able to manage the sheer number and the volume of the crowds. It's also concluded that the RCB then clarified that the entry to the stadium would require a limited entry pass. This reportedly created confusion, there was frustration, it was chaos amongst the public who had gathered already outside and inside the stadium, and they were in high emotions, and that eventually led to the stampede. Let's listen in to various reactions coming in, and then I'll go across to our guests.
There has been some mishandling of the situation. Who was responsible? We have to take action. That's why the commission has been appointed, and it essentially created a hue and cry, and the people died. And it was a national news, international news. We have to take action. So let us wait for the report, see what the report says. Based upon that, the cabinet will take a further decision.
Whenever there is a huge event happening, then it is the responsibility of the department to make appropriate arrangements, and they should be aware of the situation. These are all things there. So definitely there are lapses. Some young lives have been lost. We cannot take it so easily.
I want to go across to Sudha Halkai, who's a spokesperson of the Karnataka BJP. Deepak Timmaiah is spokesperson of the Congress. Mr. Timmaiah, nowhere in this report is it saying that the police and the state authorities, remember there were two separate functions. One was a function at the Vidhan Sauda, the other was the function that happened at the Chinnaswamy Stadium. Why did they not stop it? I mean, they're saying that they said, we're not giving permission. But where is that letter? Where is that email? Why didn't they make that public, saying that the police denied permission, and yet the RCB management went ahead with this function?
Mr. Jacob, this is under, in a sense, thorough scrutiny by the judicial inquiry, and the report has been tabled, and the report has been taken for thorough study. And the government is going to certainly take a decision whether to accept the findings of the report or to reject. And I think it is too premature to speak about the report just on the basis of what the report could be, because it's not been made public yet. And even the status report, when the status report was submitted, it was the desire of the government that because it was only a preliminary report, that the court...
Sir, for your information, this was submitted to the High Court yesterday. The High Court said, make it public, and that's how we have access to the findings of this report. Now, my point is, okay, assuming that the one-man judicial inquiry found, nothing wrong done by the state authorities or by the police, why did the Chief Minister sack the Commissioner of Police? Why did he sack his own political secretary if none of them were at fault?
Whenever some decision like this has been taken, and I think which is not seen perhaps in any of the BJP, governments or even with the central government, at least the Karnataka state government has responded. It has at least shown the people that it's serious. And let me tell you, a paid servant of the government certainly is responsible for taking care of things, what he is authorized to do. And the appointing authority also takes some decisions. And let me tell you, all these things...
But the report is not pointing a finger at any of them. The report is not saying that the Commissioner of Police was responsible or the ACP was responsible or the political secretary to the Chief Minister was responsible. The report is not blaming any of them. The report is only blaming RCB and KSCA.
When the court asked for a report like that, and the government had the responsibility to give the report, and that's one of the reasons that the government also told it very categorically that this was not a report that could be made public because it's just a preliminary report. It was not done.
Okay. Let me ask Dr. Alkai. So some of the findings. This is what the report says. Only an notice that the KSCA gave. It was a casual intimation. It was not a formal permission request. It lacked key details, number on the info of the estimated crowd size, logistics, alternate plans. There was uncontrolled turnout. Over 3 lakh people gathered for a stadium that has a 35,000 capacity. It was failure of the management because the gates did not open in time, and that led to panic and chaos. There was forced entry at gates 1, 2 and 21, and the crowds broke open the gates. So basically they are saying everything that RCB did, everything that KSCA did was wrong. And I can't wrap my head around the fact that anyone would go ahead with a public function of this nature without getting formal permission from the police.
The report that has been tabled, which projects that the state government is absolutely spotless, is highly condemnable. It is ridiculous how manipulative the state government is. It is ridiculous how circumstantially benefit they are trying to act on. Let us not forget it was Mr. D.K. Shivkumar who was on the forefront to welcome the team of the cricket players.
Yeah.
And even because he is arranging it in the Chinnaswamy Stadium, there was Mr. CM, Mr. Siddaramaiah, who told that he wants to congratulate them on the steps of the Vidhan Sabha. It's like, why should I be left behind over there? It's looked like more like a coalition government in the Karnataka. That is Mr. Siddaramaiah and Mr. D.K. Shivkumar. They are at the forefront to take all the victory parade and everything, but when it comes to this tragic death of 11 innocent people and the family members, we cannot even imagine the situation of those family members. They want to be clear with the spotless. My question is, when the police had told, no, we can't come out with the arrangement for so many people because they were absolutely tired taking care of all the celebration which was going on in the previous night, and they told there is no logistic valuation of how many people are going to be there. They were very clear on that part. Why did the CM and the Deputy CM didn't listen to their words? And why
No, but ma'am, one second. So I want to know 2 things. One, if the police have clearly said this in writing, where is it? Where is that letter? Where is that email that they sent to KSCA or to RCB saying that we can't guarantee responsibility for, the crowds coming in? I've been asking this since day one, since the day after this incident. I've not seen a public sort of display of that letter, number one. Number 2, the report today by the one-man judicial inquiry recommends action against RCB and against KSC, and that's what the Karnataka cabinet has also decided. No action against the police, men and women, some of whom were suspended. No action against, the political secretary of the chief minister who was also removed. So, there's a discrepancy here.
Exactly. Mr. Kunna and then Nagmohan Das commission, which is formed, when this commission was formed, we very well knew what the report is going to be. Because this commission has been formed every now and then whenever the state government is in trouble, and they have been giving a tailor-made report how exactly the state government forms. It is like windsheet report what they are giving. So this is absolutely condemnable, and here they are not questioning the CM or the deputy CM as told by you or any of the state officials. Here only the RCB and the DNA or the Karnataka State Congress is being questioned over here.
We are led to believe, and Mr. Timaya, we are led to believe there was a function in the Vidhan Sabha, the seat of power in Bengaluru, which was presided over by the chief minister, the highest political office in the state, and the police never gave permission for it. And we had across the road, a few kilometers down the road, in Chinnaswamy Stadium, a function that the deputy chief minister attended. 3 lakh people were outside the stadium, and the police never gave permission for it. And yet, deputy CM attended one event and CM attended another event.
Mr. Jacob, it's a very simple thing. Like even our respected guest here knows that the Karnataka Vidhan Sabha is a protected, edifice, which certainly has a police force that's assigned there to take care of it. And most of the activities happen there at a very, very short notice. It's happened even during the BJP rule. But let me tell you, to compare the Vidhan Sabha incident with the RCB or the KC incident, I think it's a little naive, according to me, because you know very well that KC is not a government body and RCB too. And most often, unless there is a very, very clear suspicion of...
Sir, but please explain to our viewers, and certainly please explain to the families of the victims, how can a function where the general public is invited go ahead without a permission from the police? Will anybody dare to do that?
That is what exactly...
Why did the CM and the Deputy CM participate in
exactly.
that case
And if it had no permission, why did the Deputy CM go all the way and becomes a guest of honor in that function?
That is exactly what the government has been saying, that there has been a serious lapse on part of the police, because, and just because, somebody has asked and the police has not, given permission or has given permission, can vindicate the police, because the police will certainly have a duty under the Constitution.
So what about the minister? What about the minister who the police report to? He has no accountability, the Home Minister? I mean, you sack the commissioner, you sack the ACP, you sack a few constables, but the person who ultimately has political authority over the police, the buck does not stop with him.
The other day, it actually happened so that when Mr. D.K. Shivakumar wanted to go a little earlier or faster or whatever, his convoy was very specifically told that they can't go beyond a certain speed, because there are protocols. Let me tell you, Mr. D.K. Shivakumar too, if he is seen doing something that is not in order, he will be told by the police not to do it.
But the police did not stop him from going to Chinnaswamy for this function, which eventually led to a stampede.
We stopped him when the stampede was going on and the death toll was increasing. Not 1 to 11 deaths. There is a death of 11 innocent children going on.
And whenever people die, in the BJP government, and those are not innocent deaths at all. When people fall from a bridge, it's not an innocent death at all. Why don't you stop all the bridges? Why don't you stop people from traveling on bridges in Gujarat? Because any bridge could fall tomorrow. Are you going to stop people from traveling? Because innocent people could fall.
I will just wrap up by saying that if the attempt of this one-man judicial commission was to try and get to the bottom of this unfortunate tragedy and to fix accountability, I dare say it's been rather selective in its nature, recommending action against RCB and the KSCA, but the people who actually bore the brunt for it, the police, the commissioner who got sacked, the ACP and other folks, the political secretary, the report does not look at their role. It certainly doesn't look at the role of the political executive, the chief minister holding a function at the Vidhan Sabha, the deputy chief minister attending the function that happened at the Chinnaswamy Stadium. Clearly, there doesn't seem to be any political accountability stopping with the chief minister or the deputy chief minister. I want to move on to the other big international story. Next week, US President Donald Trump will complete 6 months in office, and the biggest, most pertinent issue, which is sort of threatening to rip apart his entire base, really, is his handling of the Epstein files. It started off as a far right-wing conspiracy theory, and then the MAGA world got consumed by the Epstein files, and now Trump is virtually every single day having to react against the Epstein files, react against his base and saying, you're making too much of a mountain out of a molehill. He seems to be like a man with something to hide, and his base is not buying whatever explanation he is putting forth, or his Attorney General Pam Bondi is putting forth, or his FBI director and deputy director are putting out. And this has really split the MAGA base of Donald Trump right down the middle. Even in his latest comments that he made yesterday, he called this speculation over an Epstein client list as a scam, a hoax, something that the Democrats came up with. Let's listen in to what Donald Trump has said, his latest comments about the Epstein scandal.
It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats are good for nothing other than these hoaxes. They're bad for policy. They're bad for picking candidates that can get elected. Like in New York, we have a communist running. He may get elected too, actually, but he'll destroy the city. No, it's I call it the Epstein hoax.
So it's going to be 6 months very soon, next week in fact, 6 months since Donald Trump assumed the presidency for his second term. It's been a roller coaster, to say the least. And somehow this week, it's really sort of come to the fore. The one issue that seems to be certainly tearing up his base seems to be one of the most unlikely ones. It's not about Iran, it's not about Russia or Ukraine, it's not about India or Pakistan, it's not even about the trade stuff. It is about what started off as a far-right conspiracy on the Jeffrey Epstein files. Now his base feels like he cheated them because earlier, a few days ago, there was this memo that came out saying that they're not going to release more on the Epstein files, and there isn't much more to release in the Epstein files. But this seems to be the issue that is splitting MAGA up. Let's try and get an assessment of what the last 6 months have been for American domestic policy, foreign policy, vis-a-vis India as well, and of course a whole bunch of things to talk about in the wider region, whether it is Israel, Iran, whether it is Russia, Ukraine. I'm now joined by a very special guest. Mr. Edward Luce is the national editor, the U.S. national editor of the Financial Times. Thank you very much, Mr. Luce, for speaking with us. So this whole, brouhaha, this controversy that's been going around the Epstein files, certainly in Trump-verse, in MAGA-verse. What do you make of it? I mean, why do you think it's become such a potent issue in the base? So much so that Trump has had to sort of talk about it every single day this week, trying to play it down, and may I say, unsuccessfully.
Yes, very unsuccessfully. I mean, this is turning into something of a populist truth test for Donald Trump, because he and, sort of key MAGA influencers have for years been saying this is really the most important cover-up and conspiracy theory in American politics, that this notorious super rich party-goer, Jeffrey Epstein, who'd been convicted previously of having sex and trafficking with underage girls, so essentially pedophilia, and he'd served jail time for it, that there was a cover-up. And of course, this guy, Epstein, he took his life. Some people don't believe he committed suicide, but he took his life in jail, in prison, in Trump's first term. And the whole sort of issue's been building up during the Biden administration, that Biden's been covering up the Epstein files, the client list. And so for them now to sort of have marched the MAGA base to the top of the hill, only to say, right, let's march down to the bottom again, is causing immense frustration. And I think, Trump, there's a Chinese proverb, if you ride the tiger, it's hard to get off. And Trump's finding it very hard to get off this tiger, that people do not believe that there is nothing there.
But has it got to the point where some people in his base, and certainly some people who he's had a fallout with, Elon Musk in this case, are suggesting the real reason why the Epstein files are not being released is because Trump's name figures in it? You think it's got to that point? A lot of his base has started believing that that's why he's not releasing the files?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the rest of America believes that. So you've got this sort of weird, unholy alliance between liberals who are saying open the files because they think Trump will be incriminated by them. But then you've got the far right doubling down and saying release the files because they think lots of liberal, big name establishment liberals are in there. So there's a weird sort of convergence of interest with different outcomes in mind. And it's very hard to see how Trump sort of wriggles out of this one, because he's promised for so long to open these files, and to say that they're not there, and to keep telling people, as he does pretty much daily now, to move on and focus on something else, that kind of guarantees they're not going to. So I don't know how Trump wriggles out of this.
I did reference Musk earlier on, and what do you make of this whole public fallout between the world's richest man and arguably the world's most powerful man? Do you think that bridge, that friendship is completely collapsed now? There's no coming back from here on?
Yeah, well, so when they were initially falling out, I think Elon Musk passed the point of no return by saying, that Trump is on the in the Epstein files, and that's why they're not being released. I mean, to accuse somebody essentially of sexual abuse, it's pretty hard to repair friendships after that. And Musk just this week, I mean, he had a spree of about 13 postings saying, if Trump is calling this a hoax, how come Epstein committed suicide and his longtime sort of hostess aide, Ghislaine Maxwell, is serving 20 years in prison? Was that all a hoax too? So this is becoming, I mean, a really sort of visceral, jugular kind of enmity, really, between Musk and Trump. And so you've got that side of MAGA too, the plutocratic side, being Musk, and then of course the blue collar side saying we want these files released. Trump is not in a good place.
The other U-turn that he did, it also sort of came to pass this week, was the decision to send missiles, Patriot missiles to Ukraine, give more weapons to Ukraine, although he did add the caveat that it's not the United States that's going to pay for it, it's going to be European countries that are going to pay for it. And many are saying, you know, this is again Trump going the Biden way by arming Ukraine. Is that a valid criticism? And do you see the result of what you're seeing on the battlefield change as a result of this decision?
Yeah, this is, I think, the sort of biggest U-turn of Trump's first 6 months. Most of the other things that have been happening, the trade war, Liberation Day, his sort of backing of Israel, the war with courts and the rule of law, the attack on universities, all of these things are predictable, and they have happened as you would expect them to happen. On Ukraine, though, I think he's had what Barack Obama used to call a teachable moment. Trump thought that he could fix the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. Then he pushed it back to 100 days. But each time he called Putin, and they have long calls, tried to persuade Putin to agree to a ceasefire, the following sort of 24 hours, Russia would actually step up its drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. And this became pretty humiliating for Trump, in spite of the fact he really does bend over backwards to get along with Putin and express admiration for him. Putin doesn't seem to reciprocate. And so this U-turn, I think, is born of frustration that Trump's out of the deal just isn't anywhere close to working with Ukraine, but also born of some success, which is his NATO summit, the NATO summit recently. He did get America's European partners to agree to lift defense spending to 5%. And so he thought, well, look, if you're going to buy these weapons from us, sure, you can give them to Ukraine. You're going to spend money. I've been asking you to spend money. You've agreed to spend money. Okay, go ahead. Buy Patriot missiles. Buy artillery pieces. Buy 155 millimeter shells, whatever it is that Ukraine wants delivered. And so for the time being, we have a sort of Biden-esque position here from Trump, not something people anticipated.
How is it playing out, though, with Russia, with Putin? I think the Kremlin put out a statement saying, you know, we don't respond to deadlines, we don't respond to ultimatums and so on. So all of this threat of, 100% tariffs in 50 days if there's no ceasefire, the sending of these additional weapons to Ukraine. Do you think it's going to result in a ceasefire on the ground, or is Putin just going to continue doing what he's been doing over these last few years?
Yeah, 24 hours initially, then 100 days, and now there's this 50-day deadline. Which of course is relevant to India because the threat that Trump would impose direct tariffs on Russia, 100% tariffs on Russia, was accompanied by the promise of the threat of secondary sanctions on countries that buy oil and other goods from Russia, of a really steep 200, 300% tariffs. If that does come to pass, and I doubt it will, then you're going to see some real tension in India-America relations. But I don't think it will come to pass. I think Trump will find some kind of an off-ramp.
I do want to talk about India-US, firstly on the trade part, because India is one of the few countries that's escaped the tariffs for now. And in fact, I think it was either yesterday or the day before when he announced the Indonesia deal, he said India will be next. We don't quite know what the contours are. But you reckon there will be an India-US trade deal in whatever form or shape?
Yes, although I wouldn't use the word deal. Deal, normally means detailed, worked out, substantive agreements. And, there's been 3 so far, UK, Vietnam, Indonesia, plus this sort of truce with China. But if you look at the content of the UK one, it's really, there's a lot of placeholder sort of blanks. It's kind of a kabuki deal. And you never really know how long these deals are going to last with Trump. That being said, though, there was, you're right, an Indonesia deal in which Trump got major concessions. He kept 19% tariffs on India and got on Indonesia and received 0% tariff access for American goods going into Indonesia. That looks pretty good optically for Trump. And not particularly good for Indonesia. But what the Indonesians have done, and I think everybody is doing this, including India, is how do we pacify, for the time being, this sort of force of nature? How do we bring fruits to the volcano so that we can buy time to do much more serious, substantive, real deals with other trading partners? I suspect India is under a lot of pressure to open up its agricultural market. And as you know way better than I, that's not something any Indian prime minister would likely agree to. I mean, the price of onions, can cause political ructions on the streets of India. So I can't predict to you what the nature of this inverted commas deal will look like, but I suspect there will be one.
So, going back to this whole rationale of these tariffs and the deals, was that Trump feels that the global trading system, and China in particular, has been, in his words, ripping America off. So I thought the idea of the tariffs was to make sure that countries that are friendly to America are less dependent on China, and that America is less dependent on China and Chinese goods. But here, on the contrary, you have some kind of an interim arrangement with the Chinese. That's one of the few things he has going. And with all the friendly countries, Japan, South Korea, they're paying 25% tariffs, and it's not gone down well with these American ally countries. So the very rationale of imposing these tariffs in the first place, if at all there was one for this tariff policy, seems to be completely upended.
Yes, and you've got, countries that are traditionally and understandably very nervous of and hostile in some respects to China, like Japan, like South Korea, and I guess now Indonesia, moving closer to China here. So it's very hard to discern geostrategic logic in Trump's trade war. I don't think he sees this as a geostrategic issue. He sees this as anybody who's got a trade surplus with the United States is ripping us off. And my job is just to use the enormous leverage of access to the American market, to the vast American middle class, as a lever to drive those deficits down and get other deals. I mean, you should remember always with Donald Trump that the private and the public are mixed up, and that there are lots of sort of family business deals. And, if you look at the recent agreements in the Gulf, crypto deals going on here, and indeed, potentially there with Pakistan. So it's a mistake that we all fall for, to look for public rationales alone to explain or forecast Trump's behavior. He has a family business that's making a lot of money.
I do want to talk about India and Pakistan and the ceasefire that was brought about on the 10th of May after that 4-day war between India and Pakistan. Trump has been claiming, I think ad nauseum now, more than a dozen times at least, last I counted, that he was the one who enforced the ceasefire between India and Pakistan. The Indian government has firmly rejected that, saying it was actually a bilateral arrangement. Why do you think he's repeating that, to the point where the government of India is publicly rebuking that and saying that that's not the case? Is it just that he's trying to take political credit for it, or what's going on there?
So he likes to claim credit for stuff, he thinks of himself as the great deal maker. And so, this is low-hanging fruit. Well, India and Pakistan de-escalated, and I sent Rubio, not sent him, but Rubio was on the phone, and therefore it was me. I mean, I don't think it's that much more complicated. And I think, it's interesting to see Prime Minister Modi and Jaishankar. They have contradicted Trump's account, but they've done so quite politely. Yeah, firmly, but politely. Again, this fruits to the volcano thing, is relevant. You don't want to get on the wrong side of him because anything can happen. So I think, though, he's not learned that India's sort of red line here is there is no outside third-party mediation of the Kashmir dispute. I don't think he understands that. Because he keeps offering to mediate. So you might have to gird yourselves for more of this.
The other concern, and I think this is a more longer term, more strategic concern here in India, has been the sort of rehyphenation between India and Pakistan. For a long time, there was this dehyphenation, and even in U.S. presidencies, I think from George Bush's time onwards, Obama, and even during Trump's first term, and certainly during Biden's term, the whole American approach to India was, look, if there has to be a counterweight to China in the Indo-Pacific, that's why you had the Quad and all of that. So India had moved out of that league of being hyphenated with Pakistan. Somehow in the Trump second term, and because of these events, because of Operation Sindoor and the war with Pakistan, there's a degree of concern that Trump doesn't quite see India as the counterweight to China. He's happy rehyphenating India with Pakistan.
Yes, so one of the puzzles about Trump's first 6 months is we still don't know what his position is geopolitically on China. We really don't know where he stands on Taiwan, for example. Washington is a pretty hawkish town vis-a-vis China, and that's bipartisan. It's a rare bipartisan stance. Not clear what Trump's actual view is. He's quite transactional. He's been complaining a lot about Taiwan. So therefore, the natural role India has played through successive administrations this century, really since Clinton onwards, isn't necessarily one that Trump has in his mind. I think he admires Modi. I think he envies some of Prime Minister Modi's power and sort of control over Indian politics. But at the same time, there are some quite opportunistic family sort of level business offers coming out of Pakistan, and that always sort of brings up dollar signs in Trump's eyes. So, I have a colleague who says on the trade front, we know nothing. Nobody knows anything, sorry, is his phrase. And it's kind of meant to underline that Trump's unpredictable. The deals you wouldn't have imagined that are on the private side can upend public policy. Be prepared to be surprised on this, on India-Pakistan with Trump.
Okay. And I also want to ask you a question about your latest book that's just come out, the life of Zbigniew Brzezinski, America's great power prophet. Of course, he was a great strategic visionary. He sort of helped shape American foreign policy during much of the Cold War times. You compared that to what you have now, where I guess there isn't much of a policy. It's like Trump wakes up every morning and decides, okay, this is today my policy. What does that do to America's standing in the world, to the degree of trust that has been built over many decades now, particularly with America's allies and friends? How do you see that playing itself out?
Thank you for mentioning this biography. Zbigniew Brzezinski, he was Henry Kissinger's great rival and frenemy, really, during the Cold War. But one thing that did unite them, or any other great strategic thinker, Sun Tzu, or Cortilla, von Clausewitz, is that you understand your adversaries. You speak their language. You sort of eat and breathe the way they do. So it's the better to anticipate their moves. And to prevent conflict. And so that sort of thing that unites all great strategists is, I think, missing at the moment in Washington. I think you would describe it as kind of astrategic. There is no real demand for big strategic thought. And I'm not just confining these remarks to the Trump administration. There's not much curiosity about the rest of the world and what the rest of the world wants. There is just appetite to extract more from the rest of the world. And I would call that astrategic, but others might see that astrategic as a posh way of saying not very clever.
All right, Mr. Edward Luce, thank you very much for this fascinating conversation and good luck with your new book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Co-presented by. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Aviation sources have revealed to CNN News 18 that all mechanical and technical aspects are being investigated. The fuel switch cannot move without human intervention, but it is being probed if the fuel valve malfunctioned due to some technical or mechanical reasons. Let's go back to our colleague Arunima to understand more. Arunima, over to you.
So I tried to explain to you why fuel valve is suddenly in focus, because there is consensus that the fuel control switch cannot move without human intervention. Yet it seems that the AIB has concluded that the reason the Ahmedabad crash happened is because of engine losing thrust, and the engine lost thrust because fuel was not available. Why was fuel not available? If you see the pictures that have been posted in the AIB report, it's very clearly showing that the switch was in the run position. So the SOP was followed by the pilots. The SOP is, if your engine is losing power, you move the fuel control switch from cutoff to run and try and cut off and then relight, and that is what has been done in this case as well. So SOP has been followed. The question is, why was fuel not available to the engine? If the fuel switch had not been moved manually, what else could have possibly happened? And that is why the focus is now moving to the fuel valve. The word transition, some of the pilots who have been with us on our shows have also said that the word transition is more apt for the fuel valve rather than the fuel switch, because the switch just moves from on to off. It has to move from run to cut off. There's no transition. The word for the switch is move. If AIB has used the word transition, could it be an indication of the fuel valve? And the reason is because of that malfunction that we just spoke about. The pilot report gave that error message, stab POS XBCR. It does not impact your fuel switch directly. But the question is, did it impact the overall sensors of the aircraft in any way? If it impacted the overall sensor and it went unnoticed, did it in any way impact the softwares that are meant to be running this fully automated aircraft? The two technical terms that I have been given, the thrust control malfunction accommodation, TCMA, and the full authority digital intent control, FADEC. Together, I'm told they can even function without taking the command of the pilot. That's the key area where the focus seems to be right now.
Okay, Arunima, we did explain this to our audience earlier, but I almost want you to break it down for us in layman terms. What is a fuel valve, and how is understanding what a fuel valve is and how it correlates to this different from what the switch's purpose was?
So just think of your vehicle in layman's term, because we're all car drivers. Let me try and explain it to you in terms of how a car moves. When we are talking about a fuel switch, we move it from run to cut off. Exactly what happens is that there is a fuel tank, there's a fuselage, and there's a valve there which is operated. When you're moving the switch to run, the valve is operational. When you're moving it to cut off, it means the valve shuts down and the engine does not get any fuel. That's what it means. That's what the action of the fuel switch is. What if the fuel valve starts acting independent of the fuel switch? What if there is a software malfunction which completely disassociates the switch from the valve? Pilots I spoke to said that this is very rare, but it is not an impossible situation. It is not a possibility that can be completely denied. And the reason they are saying it is exactly the two terms that I told you about, FADEC and the thrust control mechanism, completely software driven, automated, not in the hands of the pilot. Was there some problem there? Did some sensor malfunction affecting the overall electricals, overall software, leading to an issue with the valve? We don't know. A lot of speculation. We want AIB to give us the final details. But I can tell you after speaking to sources and aviation experts that this is also a focus area.
Okay, Arunima, we are going to come back to you in a second. Stay with us, please. We have more breaking news coming in this same story. We're learning that the Federation of Indian Pilots has now expressed concern regarding the preliminary findings and the public discourse that has surrounded the findings. They've said that assigning blame before a thorough, transparent and data-driven investigation is premature and irresponsible. Let's just go over to our colleague Arunima to understand more. Arunima, similar to other pilot bodies and what they've come to our show and said in the last few days, can you bring us more context?
If you can repeat that, there was a problem with my...
Yes, we were just sharing with our audience what it is that the Federation of Indian Pilots has had to say. We were just sharing it as...
Namaste, Jai Hind and welcome to the Hard Facts. I'm Anand Narsimhan. As we focus on the alliance realignment buzz in the state of Maharashtra, there was some ungainly pictures that came, visuals which are what would say unparliamentary inside the Legislative Assembly, does not behove of elected representatives. Dramatic moments. Supporters of BJP MLA Gopichand Padalkar and NCP SP MLA Jitendra Awad clashing in